So good afternoon and welcome everyone for this session uh, where we have dignitaries from the solar and wind value chain as a part of this session. There is a lot that's happening linked to energy transition, right from government and regulatory agencies drawing attention by announcements as well as regulatory reforms to India surfacing on the global map from the point of view of being important in terms of lowering emissions. And then also we transitioning very swiftly towards goals which have been set up. So I think the Panchamrit agenda and COP27 update clearly outlines the role in a way a part of this journey. So welcome everyone. What I have done is, for the purpose of this session, I have divided the entire session into three categories. Solar being an important part of the overall energy transition journey. I am looking at, what are the kind of growth opportunities which are coming up in the solar space. How competitive are various parts of the value chain, and what are the key risks as we take strides into significant increase in terms of solar capacities which are getting added up. So I have dignitaries from the industry, Mr. Vivek Srivastava, who is CEO Waaree Group. I have Mr. Narendra Verma, who represents CleanMax. I have Cyriac Loyola, who again represents, being a part of the entire value chain. I also have Mr. Rishabh Jain, who is a part of CEEW. And, most importantly, from, Mr. Manoj Kumar Upadhyay, who also represents, in a way, government in the entire process. So let's start, with our 1 hour conversation around the space. I would request that, all of you limit yourself to, 2 minutes maximum for answering a question so that we can cover all the three rounds. As I said, I'll be starting with round 1, which mainly focuses on defining competitiveness of the Indian solar value chain. Then we will move on to the round of opportunities, existing as well as new opportunities. And the third round, which is linked to risk, to the kind of execution that we are going to see. So let's begin with Mr. Vivek Srivastava, who has been, there in the industry for a long time. Waaree, of course, is playing a very important role as a part of the value chain. Mr. Srivastava, we have the PLI scheme, which was being announced by the government, and we have had this one segment, which is solar module manufacturing, where there have been 2 rounds accounting for a significant chunk of the total capacity additions which are taking place under the PLI scheme. Do you think that the domestic manufacturers can narrow the price delta with Chinese players after becoming a part of the PLI scheme? Not only that, do you believe that, we can compete globally, in this space as being a part of the PLI scheme? Over to you, Mr. Srivastava.
Thank you. A very pertinent question. PLI seems to be the buzzword, but let me step back a minute and get the context right in terms of how do you promote domestic manufacturing? See, compared to what China is, about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, India was a far more prolific producer, actually doing more than China and exporting compared to. But what has really changed? We need to understand that any manufacturing industry, coming even to specifically to solar, is a triad. There is always a triangle. One, to support domestic manufacturing and grow it, is the assured demand, which has to be assured and consistent. Second is a set of incentives, and incentives of which PLI is an integral part, but it relates to capital subsidy, lower interest charges, financing, infrastructure status, lower CapEx, lower OpEx, etc. And the third is what we call deterrence. Any industry in the world, you can say disincentives or whatever, which can be in the form of financial, which is like higher custom duties, higher, additional safeguards, or structural, which is in the form of mandating more usage of domestic products, etc. So out of this, PLI does play an integral part, but when I compare to China, we are still far off. And the cost comparison to China also belies a little bit of scale impact, because when we look at the largest producers, there are all 60, 70 gigawatt plus, along with a value chain that supports them within few hundred kilometers of the entire process, and the government support there. Suffice to say that Indian panel manufacturers were literally in the middle of a desert with zero duty till last fiscal, and out of that to grow from 12 gigawatt to 38 gigawatt is proof that Indian manufacturers are looking at a very resilient market. But coming to PLI in the global context, when the PLI was created, I must say, still a wonderful scheme, a good start. But if you look at IRA, for example, in USA, what does the PLI provide? If I look at about 300 crores in 5 years on 1 gigawatt on a turnover of 12,500 crore, less than 2.5 or 3%. Compared to that, IRA is about 9 cents to 15 cents, okay? Which clearly tells you that as the world is evolving, new energy is an evolving subject. We need to now become more dynamic, rather than keep looking at the rear view mirror and driving, look in the front and see what more needs to be done for India to become competitive globally. That is the way to look at the present situation. I think PLI is a good start, but it is not capital subsidy. One gets that after start of production in 5 years. So there is a need to now get more domestic manufacturing more lucrative. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's a great comparison with IRA, B, that, it's not a capital subsidy and, comes up only after you start actually production. Let me move to, Colonel Verma over here from CleanMax. Mr. Verma, CNI segment or, commercial and industrial power is very important because it structurally accounts for 50% of the total power requirement. You can service it through DISCOMs or through the open access route. With the ever-changing open access rules across states, what do you believe are the prospects, or rather the competitiveness of open access based CNI segment to DISCOM power in key industrial states? Do you believe that, they can be competitive enough? Your views on that, sir?
So, Hetal, it's a good question. And I think one of the challenges that the industry has always been facing is this changing dynamics of policies. Because we know the renewable energy in India and abroad, anywhere else, is a policy-driven space, which is incentivized, or the direction is guided by the policies. So open access policies, unfortunately, have been shifting, but I think the positive part of the whole thing, that over the last 2 years or so, right, driven right from top, from the nation down, most of the policies are now getting geared towards open access. Where open access was a side business, we can clearly see that open access is now the core business in most cases. Where the earlier growth on renewable was more driven by SECI bids and the state bids, we are clearly seeing that the government now needs to, or is already planning to, move away from actually doing it, but to enabling it. And our policies are also shifting in that direction. So open access surely is the North Star. Whether at the operational or a tactical level, there could be slight disconnects, and that could be because of local domestic compulsions and state level dynamics, politics, and there's so many other things which the DISCOMs today are facing. And as a result, this conflict continues to happen. But I see it's a matter of time when the alignment will happen. However, to come to specific to your question on competitiveness of open access versus the state DISCOMs, I think today it doesn't make any sense for anybody. Some people might do it for certain reasons. But broadly, from a commercial perspective, the C&I market or an open access works on the model that they give a saving to the customer. So if he's paying an X amount today, we are offering a discount on the X when he basically takes an open access from us. And fortunately for the entire industry and the nation, there is a gap between what he's paying to the discoms and what he will be able to source from an open access. Now, there's a good thing that the government has adopted something called green tariff. I think we'll discuss it later on also. But that's actually adding on to the current retail price that the customer is paying.
Absolutely.
So now I think it's no brainer today that somebody would like to save few pesas by going open access instead of paying some more extra pesas to the discount. So, but it's purely a matter of choice of availability of open access. So it also depends. I might want to go green, but I might not have a player who might be offering an open access power in that particular region or a state. Because it's also in function of the availability of transmission, availability of connectivity point. And then all said and done, it's ultimately a business decisions by different companies, and they have their own priorities to decide which state, which sector, which kind of customers they want to address. So I think both will coexist, I would say, but it will take some time for the green tariff based, discount based this thing to go. And it might be actually a good option for customers who might not be able to cross the hurdle on their credit rating, because many companies, especially the big companies, seek a particular credit rating from customers to be able to give them an open access because of the surety of the investment. But since discoms don't ask that, for somebody who can't meet that but wants to go green, I think discom based green tariff is the best option for him, which he can immediately use.
Okay, so yes, I think Mr. Verma very clearly mentions about the kind of ifs that the open access based CNI segment actually faces, and the yes and the no's between the two segments. That is one part of the value chain which is really evolving. And then, you are also having within the discom space or within the competitive bidding space, newer business models which are emerging. So to touch upon that part, Cyriac, I'll move on to you. There are a lot of new business models that have come up in India. We have the RTC, round the clock power market. We have peak power, business models which have come in, plain hybrid based, power supplies, business models which are, catching up pace. So much so that they now account for almost 25% of the bids which are being rolled out. Do you believe that they are competitive enough to garner higher share of the total bids which are happening as on today? Because of course, the rates at which they are happening would be higher than the normal solar or wind standalone bids. But what is the sense that you have, and any best practices that you would have seen in the international markets in terms of new business models which you would want to share that are emerging in India? Over to you, Cyriac.
Yeah, thanks, Hetal. So especially when you see the storage kicking into the industry, the PV plus storage projects. So this makes it technically viable, first of all, to have a kind of firmed power that can be sold to the C&I customers or to the discoms. So in the past, it's solar, we were following the curve, or it's wind, we are following the seasons. But now, as we know that with storage kicking in, we are able to club the PV plus storage or the wind plus storage, mainly with an intention of firming the renewable outputs. So this is kind of when you think about this, there is an added capex. But when it comes to competitiveness, are we comparing this RE plus storage with the conventional coal or thermal, or are we comparing this RE plus storage versus pure play solar? So with pure play solar, it's going to be it's not going to be competitive, but at the same time, it's not a path that we wanted to keep on going forever, just to keep following the solar curves. We want the power plants, the RE plants, to produce firm power to the discoms, or we need a firm power on which the discoms can plan their purchase, or the customers can plan their forecast. So with that, if you compare the RE plus storage with the firmed output versus the conventional thermal plants, the RE plus storage is already competitive enough. So with that sense, also this is a clear trend we are also seeing in India as well as outside India to the markets where we are catering, that the trend going forward is the PPAs or the long-term PPAs or the discounts of the C&I customers, they are no longer very much particularly interested about just buying pure play solar energy, but it has to be a firmed constant power over the day with certain forecasting involved. So in that sense, yes, it is competitive.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point. A requirement is more towards formed up power, and therefore storage becoming a critical part of the bids is something that is a no-brainer. Within storage also, sorry, Cyriac, but I'm asking you an add-on question on this. Within storage also, there are different opportunities emerging, right? You have the battery-based storage, and you also have PSP, which is referred to as one of the cheapest or a more natural way of storing power. What would you say in terms of competitiveness between these two categories? Do you believe that they are for different applications, or there is going to be a direct competition between the two?
Of course, when you see purely from the energy, they have to compete with each other. And now, as of today, pump storage is way cheaper. But we are also seeing a trend in the batteries prices coming down. But it's going to be competitive. But the key differentiator here is it's not just the energy, but it is also the other aspects or other use case flexibilities that the battery plants can contribute. So if it is pumped hydro, yes, it can contribute to the energy needs, but when it comes to the stability or the power or the frequency responses, those kind of use cases, battery energy storage system is much more flexible to cascade several different use cases over each other compared to the pumped or other forms of storage that is coming up. So yeah, we need to have a competitive look from that angle as well.
Understood. Thanks. Because we are talking about storage, I would quickly want to jump to Mr. Upadhyay, who is Deputy Advisor Energy Niti Aayog. Sir, energy storage is something which is being really spoken about. And, battery versus PSP is also something which everybody is talking about. Would like to understand from you, how is it that Niti Aayog internally and the government or the Ministry of Power is looking at both these technologies? We are looking, or CRISIL estimates almost 60 gigawatts of storage that would definitely be needed by 2030. CEA talks about a number which is a notch higher than that. Would like to understand, how is the government internally looking at this? BESS, is it BESS versus PSP, or it is BESS and PSP? Over to you, Mr. Upadhyay.
Thank you, madam. That versus is not a theory. BESS versus pump storage is not a theory. Government wanted a clean power, and obviously the PSP has a more advantage than the battery storage. It's technically established, economically established. The thing is that the long gestation period for establishing the pump storage and the limited site that we have. So we cannot create pump storage everywhere. We have to have either natural site, otherwise we have to make a dam. So right now, government is working on focus 10 gigawatt pump storage project. And as everybody is aware that there is a BGF scheme for battery storage, third party as service provider, the BGF for the battery storage. So both technologies, government is pushing both technologies. Battery supply market is establishing faster than the PSP. That's why right now the target is 4 gigawatt for the battery. And for that 40% capital subsidy has been announced already. And it is soon be approved by cabinet also. And for the PSP 5,000 gigawatt, 20% capex is already announced. There's a PSP guideline is already publicly available. So both they're called competition. Yes, PSP is preferred. Ministry of Power is looking more location. They have already finalized lot of site. They have already classified site under preparation, under construction. and all these things. In long run, PSP is going to win the race because battery may have some challenge of the second life, third life, and also recycling things. And the biggest challenge for the battery is the critical mineral availability. Right now, the lithium ion, that preferred battery technology that we have to import a lot of critical minerals. And if we are not shifting from lithium ion to flow batteries or other batteries, so the scenario may require a lot of import. So we wanted to, at a time, to get rid of import of energy or import of minerals, but this is going to increase our import. So the balancing out both by saying that we wanted to become energy independent by 2047. So our reliance would be more on the PSP side and more new technology, which is free from import of the critical minerals. But right now, the balance approach for both PSP and BSS is now getting edge because of the supply chain and market stability. And already PLI scheme for that National Advanced Chemistry Cell announced and 30 gigawatt tender already awarded. MNR is also coming out with some new policy on the grid scale battery side. So this is giving more support to the battery right now. So, but both are balanced in that now.
Okay. So that's great opportunity for both, near-term opportunity more from a battery perspective. Now, while we have dealt with business models, manufacturing, battery opportunities which are coming in, and have also understood what the government is thinking about, these kind of opportunities. Let me jump on to Rishabh, who will be able to provide us a third eye view or a bird's eye view, neutral view more, if I may say so, from a manufacturing perspective. I think manufacturing has been the buzzword, right from India wanting to increase its manufacturing share as a percentage of GDP. And there are sectors like solar module that are going to account for a larger percentage of these contributions which are going to come up. We are also looking at backward integrated technologies. Now, PLI scheme and outside PLI scheme, we have sufficient amount of announcements coming up, almost 70 to 75 gigawatt worth of solar module manufacturing announcements, which stand steady as on today. We also, on the other side, have imposed customs duty on imported modules. We have ALMM requirements for registration. And I'm sure Mr. Srivastava is loving all of that. But Rishabh would like to hear from you that, domestic module making ecosystem, do you believe that everything that is being done is going to pan out to actually grow the ecosystem, or in a way we will enter into a protectionist zone and might start impacting because you are not having natural demand supply dynamics that's impacting the industry? How do you see this entire thing from all the research that CEEW has put in together in this space?
Thank you, Hetal. So couple of pointers from our side. First of all, I think when we are thinking about manufacturing, we have to start thinking beyond India also. So we often, whenever we think about manufacturing, we tend to start thinking that what is the domestic demand? Do we necessarily have the capability to manufacture any technology, not just solar, but even say, for instance, battery storage technologies? And is it always better to import at a cheaper rate? I mean, if we take that short-term view in terms of maybe the prices will be lower, there is no denying that we'll end up buying any product which is at a lower cost. But if we start thinking more strategically on, in the long term, what works for the country in adding, of course, to the growth of the economy, creating more jobs, and also building a resilient supply chain so that the deployments are in our control. The COVID-19 pandemic, but also the Russia-Ukraine war has exposed the vulnerabilities of the global supply chain in any commodity, not just in the energy sector, but any commodity. And of course, the energy sector being one of the sectors which has been very much impacted. We can see, of course, from the gas, petrol, oil, and other things. So I don't necessarily think that building domestic manufacturing is even optional anymore. That is something that we have to do. And then we'll have to figure out what works in India's favor. We have, in the last 10 years, tried different mechanisms. So we started with the anti-dumping regulations, where of course we did not implement, but there was something there was a full case and investigation that went through. We had safeguard duty, then we have DSEZ that still continues, ALMM, BCD, PLI. Thankfully, in the last couple of years, the combination, I would not say PLI, the combination of PLI plus ALMM plus BCD worked in the favor. But more importantly, I think the confidence that the industry was getting from the government that we will support domestic manufacturing no matter what. Maybe it's okay if the tariff increase in the short term, but in the long term, that is important. However, now that we are seeing all the numbers that you're saying, I mean, some estimates also say that we may cross 100 gigawatts of solar module by 2030. However, you would have seen in the last couple of days, and of course, we have now taken a step back on ALMM. In the last couple of, I'm seeing some news on, is there something going to happen on BCD? All of these policy changes may not necessarily work in India's favor, because any investor, not even, I would not say manufacturer, but anyone who's wanting to invest in companies either through equity, debt, and because we are thinking of large capacities, will want to see that their investment is secured. It is, I mean, solar or any manufacturing is very different from, say, a generation where you are guaranteed that this is the generation, there is someone on the offtake side. So the credit rating or anything, it's more guaranteed and safer. But a manufacturer needs to get the offtake guarantee. But if we are opening our border gates, closing it, opening, closing, it then creates a lot of uncertainties, both in, of course, people who are in manufacturing, but also the investors. So I would say if the policy is the way we are seeing in the couple of years and the intention, more importantly, the intention continues, which I think in the broader level is there, then we would definitely see a lot of manufacturing, actually excess manufacturing going forward than what we need, at least in the short term. And then I would also want to point out that globally, countries are looking to diversify. Last month, we came out with a report for the India's G20 presidency in detailing out the renewable energy supply chain, including solar modules. And we're seeing more and more countries globally. I mean, we did some analysis. 92 countries are now importing solar modules greater than USD 10 million per year. And more and more countries are having concentrated imports. India, at this particular moment, offers an alternative to China. And if we continue on this path, I think we'll be able to, by end of this decade, provide a competitive environment for manufacturing and also supply to the world.
Yeah, so that's a great point that Rishabh has made, that why look only inwards, and competitiveness also from the external or outwards perspective. And that brings me to my second section of discussion, which is new opportunities which are getting created. And none other than Mr. Srivastava can answer this, because we have read enough that how solar module players are not only targeting Indian markets, but they are also wanting to look outwards. So, Mr. Srivastava, if I have to ask you, the Chinese market is crossing deployments of almost 100 gigawatts. North America, Europe are also expecting deployments of 100 gigawatts. And total global deployments in solar are also upwards of 300 gigawatts. How do you think can India best leverage the opportunity to become a major supplier or be a real China plus one partner to the world in supplying modules? I think Rishabh also touched upon that, with the geopolitical tensions, it's now not an option, but a requirement to have a diversified supply chain. So what do you believe can the role India play in the global solar module supply chain? Over to you, Mr. Srivastava.
Thank you. And Rishabh has laid the floor wonderfully. He's defined the metrics so well. I can only add to say, very rarely in the history of trade or in the global scenario, you're presented with an opportunity which is at your doorstep. And solar, the new energy business, actually, we have been importing energy, and whether it is conventional fossil fuel or even solar. Now is the time, whether it is green hydrogen or solar or any of these things, that India can be a net exporter of energy. I mean, I look at solar module as a way of generating energy more than anything else. Today, if you look at the world, China has crossed 100 plus, and 325 plus is going to be the run rate immediately. Out of that, if India minus China is not even able to corner 25 to 30% market share, I would say we would have missed out a huge opportunity. But for that, besides what government's effort, it is important to create consensus. See, last year, I am seeing that only 2.7 gigawatt got exported, which was reported as 1,000% increase, 800% increase. That's fine, but 2.7 gigawatt in the world is a drop in the ocean. With
Correct.
27 gigawatt of high-end module manufacturing nameplate capacity there, 2.7 is just 10%. So first of all, we need to shed this mindset that there would be compulsions on domestic demand, which I will address later on. But that's the first part. We need now to think out of the box that globally there is an opportunity. This is a business. Besides just solar module for manufacturers, look at it can create immediately a foreign exchange, export earning of more than $10 billion easily. Secondly, the job opportunities. Every gigawatt is known to create an opportunity of 1,200 people direct employment and about 3,000 indirect. Just simply stated, India's entire, today conundrum is employment. This addresses it in that way. So again, the other question is, how would Indian modules be received? I can only give you anecdotal evidence that today North America, the topmost developers who require highest amount of bankability and criterias, which are funded by the best institutions in the world, are banking upon Indian manufacturers. I know that firsthand, though I will not talk about individual names. So quality is not a concern. Technology is not a concern. Indian manufacturing ethos are evolving and will get better with time. I only wish and hope that we can really leverage. The support that is required from the government is that there is no country in the world which survives without some export incentives. Besides the ease of doing business, there is also a need like what was there 8 to 9% before. We should immediately look at that of providing export incentives so that we don't miss out on the opportunity. As Rishabh said, the world is no longer after the disruption of supply chain. There are some parts of the world which are not just looking at China plus one. They are now looking at one plus China. And I think this is India's moment that we should not let go. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought. Mr. Srivastava spoke about the ease of doing business. Solar model manufacturing is energy intensive, and power cost in India would be substantially higher than the power cost which are actually existing in China. So in a way, a circular loop that needs to be solved to make us competitive from a global landscape. At the same time, Indian corporates are looking at clean energy as an opportunity. And I would like to move to Colonel Verma for this. You have net zero goals, and an analysis that CRISIL did showed that almost 50 to 60% of the top 200 corporates are having net zero goals earlier than India's overall net zero goals of 2070. They're looking for green power as an opportunity assessment. Do you believe this has already started benefiting open access based CNI segment volumes in India? And what is the kind of opportunity that you see for open access based CNI segment, given these targets that large Indian corporates are having? Mr. Verma?
So Hetal, I think it's no rocket science that the corporate demand multiple reasons, and surely net zero is one of the major reasons why corporates are going green. We are already seeing that probably this year we would be doing about more than double the C&I than what we have done last year. And it's only going to go up because of the demand. So the question is how much would be the demand, and the question is how much would be able to service it. If you just take a simple example, even if you take the government's stated goal of 280 gigawatt by 2030, we require almost 27 to 30 gigawatt per year for the next couple of years. And surely if we are saying 50% of the demand actually is consumed by the C&I, a plain simple arithmetic would say at least anything around 10 to 15 gigawatt is what C&I should be consuming. And we are today, even we are nowhere near it. So surely the trajectory is upward. The challenge would be whether we are equipped to manage that and handle it and actually service it. Because while the numbers might look very rosy, we need to understand that it's a very complex value chain that finally delivers the energy to the customers. It starts from land and power evacuation. And these two resources in India has always been constrained. And I don't think that there is something miraculous that's going to happen, at least in the immediate future, which is going to really change this landscape. On the transmission, yes, the government has been making a lot of investment in creating dedicated green corridors, creating substations where the green power can be connected. And also the policies are now moving towards supporting the developers on C&I by removing the hoarding that is happening on the transmission. Today, what's happening, earlier the policy was pay some couple of lakh rupees and block a capacity in a substation and then keep extending till the time the developer actually gets a customer and then sell the site to him. With the just to take it away, the government is now surely moving away in seeing that genuine players who are actually serious about it and have the investment capacity are the one who will probably be getting the capacities. So I think the stage 1, stage 2 and all those kind of policies are surely the thing in the right way, which will release the locked capacities in transmission. But I would say, I think it would be fair enough to say that at least in the near future, 1 or 2 years, we should be seeing about 7 to 8 or maybe 7 to 8 gigawatts, and then slowly it should pick it up beyond it. Already, like SECI not being there, and even the big IPP players who were not looking at C&I, and C&I was actually left to the newer players in the market. I think C&I is now will become the core business for most of the IPPs also. So we are seeing that trend, no doubt about it. And maybe going forward in next about 4 to 5 years, I think anything beyond 10 to 12 gigawatts should be the objective of the industry to ramp up. If you don't do it, we will surely miss the bus and reach the point what we are overall, the corporates are targeting from the net zero goal point of view, and we as a nation is targeting from the green goals that what we have set to ourselves.
I think that's a great number to work with, shows the strong opportunity that clearly exists in this segment. A lot of players who are a part of this niche area of the value chain should expect a lot of traction. Now that brings me to other new opportunities or new age opportunities which are coming up, and none other than Mr. Manoj Kumar Upadhyay can actually answer, given that Niti Aayog has an important role to play in terms of establishing credentials for new technology. Hydrogen is something, and green hydrogen is something that is being spoken about. There is a policy in place already which speaks about targets of around 5 million ton per annum of hydrogen. Back of the envelope math tells us that that would clearly mean at least or definitely more than 100 gigawatt of additional RE capacity that will need to be set up just to service the green hydrogen demand. Mr. Upadhyay, I want to understand, how big an opportunity from a solar value chain point of view do you see hydrogen to be, green hydrogen to be? And do you believe what, Mr. Verma also touched upon, that land now will start becoming a critical monitorable, given we are talking about already 167 gigawatt of solar in business as usual that will be added, plus 100 plus gigawatt of solar or renewable combined with a higher share of solar will be added just from a hydrogen perspective. How do you look at that, Mr. Upadhyay, from an opportunity perspective?
Yeah, so thank you. So this land perspective is a big challenge, and converting the fallow and wasteland for using industry is also a challenge. Now for the especially solar generation, because the radiation versus availability of land. So though we have a solar map of India and we can easily locate the project and we can basically plan for the project things. But yes, land is becoming a challenge for the developer and for the government as well, because lot of project plans only in either agricultural land, either land which is meant for some other activity. So converting lot of fallow land which is not So tell for anything else, especially government of Gujarat, right now they had tender for the Kutch, and they had tender and successful bidder got very big chunk of land at very low cost. So they have identified their fallow land and they wanted to promote industry over there only. So lot of new activity based on the land requirement states are planning, but yes, more activity need to be done. Coming to that green hydrogen based solar requirement. So yeah, you say that 100 gigawatt, maybe more than, because 5 million ton is only the scheme target. So this will be going to generate lot of other industry. So it may generate more requirement of solar generation. Right now, we have already planned for the 500 gigawatt. Out of that, 260, 270 or 280 gigawatt, maybe a solar one. And till date, means till March 31st, 66 gigawatt was the installed capacity, and almost 100 plus gigawatt is under pipeline in different stages. So what we are thinking that the current requirement for this 5 million ton green hydrogen will be covered under this 500 gigawatt only. So means 280 gigawatt already covering 100 plus gigawatt, which is going for the green hydrogen. Because right now, what Mr. Verma was saying, that a transmission line. So though we are making a lot of transmission line, but there is a transmission resilience that they have to basically bear the frequency and voltage things. And also the lot of disturbance in the Rajasthan last 1 year is basically showing that the inverter issues, the other challenges is start coming from the solar side, because the inverter is, their relay setup is fixed, and if there is change in the production of either from wind or solar side, so the relay is going out. So lot of challenge and lot of new opportunities there for that entire sector. So 280 gigawatt will be going to serve both our electricity requirement for decarbonization, also the green hydrogen requirement.
Okay.
Government is planning for a lot of other things like floating solar. So floating solar is coming very big way. And the incentive that initially planned for that one, lot of incentive also given. So this is now matching with the ground mounted solar also. So a lot of solution on the floated solar plus the fallow conversion, as Gujarat is doing, is required for that, for sorting out the land requirement issues.
Okay, so there are good insights on floating solar, new opportunities, as well as fallow land conversions. Gujarat, again, leading on that front. But Rishabh, this brings me to my next question. Floating solar clearly is getting tested. We are seeing players announcing, floating solar projects on a test basis. One or two of them have been commissioned also. Mr. Upadhyay also mentions that, that is one of the ways of fighting the land issue that might emerge as we keep adding more capacities. Your views, CEEW views on floating solar, we understand higher capex. What are the nuances you believe can help India capitalize the floating solar space, which can be a new addition in the cap?
Right. So a couple of things. The land challenges, the land specific challenge for any renewable technology is something that needs to be addressed, because everything that is associated with after the project deployment takes time, either in terms of construction of these transmission lines, either within state, between states, etc., and how the conflict with the flora, fauna, and of course the local community is there. However, of course, floating solar is an important opportunity where at least the demand for land may reduce. But while I'll come to floating solar, I also want to mention that the analysis that we conducted and released a couple of years ago on India's net zero, right? How much solar needs to come online? It is 5,000 plus gigawatts by 2070 if we have to meet net zero. That's huge quantities. Right now, we are less than 100 gigawatt and we are talking about 5,000. So despite all these diversification of various technologies, land and how do we streamline availability of land is something that we need to constantly address. So there is, floating solar can maybe support in some aspect, but that challenge, of course, is something that we have to plan well in advance. Now, coming back to floating solar, As you mentioned, there are some of these pilots that are being conducted, or maybe even proper projects that are being conducted across the country, and not just in India, but globally. Specifically, we've seen countries like Japan, Korea, etc., where some of these projects, even to the tune of 1 megawatt beyond, was set up. However, what needs to really understand is this: the pilot or the project itself is fairly new for the country itself. How some of these technologies interact with the local water, with the water body itself, is yet to be seen. While the solar modules or the inverters are okay to be set up in some of these areas, but over 25 years, how would they? How would the moisture in the air itself have? Will it have any impact on solar module or any other part of the system? Is something that needs to be tested. This is one. The other bit is, if we are setting up some of these projects which have already some aquatic life living in it, what is the impact of that aquatic life because of the solar modules or the solar system? Those are some of the studies also that need to be conducted, so that there are no unintended consequences. Beyond that, I would say some of the challenges are also very similar to offshore wind, depending on if we also want to set up in our oceans, maybe in a hybrid manner with offshore projects, or even in projects where we are even drilling oil. In those places, the transmission line, of course, will have to again be constructed. And those are projects that we can set up in large quantities, but they have to also witness certain weather conditions. So I think it will be a mix of challenges depending on where we set up floating solar projects. We would, as part of the process, should do some of these pilots. The government should.
So great insights on that. Onshore or offshore wind combining with floating solar could also be an option, but transmission lines will remain monitorable. It must say that opportunity is at a very, very nascent stage. That brings me to Mr. Loyola. Again, an opportunity and storage we spoke about. In interest of time, very quickly would like to understand from you grid storage, specific focus on grid storage. Large scale storage space needed. What is the kind of opportunity that you see just from that point of view? How much do you believe could be the opportunity over the next 6-7 years until 2030?
Yeah. Just to quickly add, so typically these stability problems or the grid stability problem starts to happen when the RE penetration is coming off like 20 to 30%. What Mr. Upendra was touching upon earlier, we just are beginning to experience such problems in states like Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu, and so this is where the flexibility of the battery storage, when we couple the today's deployment of PV plus storage with additional features which can aid the grid stability. So that's where the technology has an answer for this problem, especially the storage, the PV plants which are struggling to ride through the disturbances in Rajasthan, for example, they're not capable because they don't have the energy resource. But on the other hand, the battery storage inverters, they have the energy resource to withstand or to support the grid disturbances in that area. And we are not just talking about the clouds appearing or sun going up and or down, but we are also talking about more aspects to the grid stability in terms of its inertial strength or the short circuit capabilities, etc. But in that sense, the power electronics or the battery storage inverters has this capability to emulate the behavior of rotating machines. So we are kicking out the rotating machines on one side, and we are adding more and more solar. But who is going to do this job of grid stability? So that is something we need to ensure that in our today's, that the storage inverters or the storage projects, what we are going to deploy today, are also capable of supporting or emulating the behavior of the synchronous machines in the future, to make sure that the grid stability is addressed. So this is where the opportunity, we are going to see more disturbances in the next upcoming years, and the technology is right to rely on the storage, RE plus storage projects to address those challenges.
I think that's a great add to also what Mr. Upadhyay said. about, kind of real life problems which areas like Rajasthan are facing and how it can actually be a good enough blend. Now, the third part, and in interest of time, I'm going to just take one-liners from all of you.
Is it mute?
With all the opportunities, you have, risk which is associated. All the growth also has areas that we need to be careful about. So I'm going to request Mr. Srivastava, Mr. Verma, and Mr. Loyola, all three of them who are industry veterans, to give me one risk which they want to be mindful about as they move into this high growth journey path. So, Mr. Srivastava, you can speak about one risk which is important to monitor from a module manufacturing perspective. Mr. Verma, you can speak same from, the technology, from the CNI segment perspective. And Mr. Loyola, you can speak the same from the storage perspective. Yes, all three of you, one risk for your respective segments.
Among so many risks, to prioritize risk is also a great risk, but I'll attempt that. So it is, if there is one risk that we are very, that has the potential to shatter investor confidence and put us in the gridlock, is the inconsistency in policy implementation. Repeatedly flip-flops that Rishabh also mentioned dents the investor confidence. So I think when we start a journey, we need to be patient. Rome was not built in a day. We should remember that. And that is what I would be looking out for as the biggest risk in the coming few months, not just years. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. Okay, policy certainty is Mr. Srivastava's take. Mr. Verma, over to you. Risk.
I think since Mr. Srivastava has already covered the number one risk that all of us perceive, I think the next risk that I would put on our table that we have to be very, very conscious about is the commercial viability of C&I, given the technological changes that continues to keep evolving and the choices and the options that the customers have, and how much of the net zero talk actually sees the walk. Today still a lot of it is aspirational, and we will really have to see how much of it sees the light of the day.
Okay, I think fair enough. Technology risk in a way to an emerging segment. Mr. Loyola, from a storage perspective, what do you believe is a risk? I think policy does apply over there also, but what beyond that you see as a risk?
I would pick grid stability is a big risk. The hidden problem is it will delay the approval process. Or like what's happening in Australia or UK, people have to wait, developers have to wait for a year or two just to get the grid interconnection approval, just to make sure that everything is stable. And that is something we can avoid because we have the Australia and UK did not have the technology 3 years, 4 years back. They were just adding pure play solar and those inverters started having problem. But we have the technology today. So we can be prudent enough to make sure that today's deployment, what we do, are capable of aiding the grid stability, and then it will streamline the future deployments as well, and it will save a lot of time as well.
Okay, so we have three industry participants speaking about transmission, technology, and of course, policy. Three main risks. Rishabh, I'll move on to you. From an overall energy transition perspective, and you spoke about net zero, we are talking about large execution pipelines which are there. So what is the risk that you see from an overall energy transition perspective when you are looking at this junction at which India is?
I would again maybe build on what I mentioned earlier. I think vulnerabilities in the supply chain of renewable energy technologies is the biggest risk, that not just for India, but globally. And I don't necessarily mean that we have to manufacture everything domestically, but we should be aware what are the choke points, how much are we dependent, how much can we be dependent, and how much can we manufacture either in India or in countries where the vulnerabilities may be lower. So all these assessments need to be carried out. And without that, we may have everything, all the best policies, all the money. But if one thing stops, the whole our net zero ambitions and our ability to achieve 500 gigawatts of non-fossil by 2030 can come to a halt or get delayed. So we have to make those assessments and decide how much we want to do internally and how much we should be reliant on exports.
Perfect. So supply chain risk, the new geopolitical tensions that have emerged globally has made the supply chain risk a very important monitorable. So, that I'm sure Mr. Upadhyay is already noting down all of that, but the buck stops finally at what the government thinks. So, last word from you, Mr. Upadhyay. I think all of this risk in a way are, known. Net zero, technology, transmission, they are known, but they are here and therefore need to be solved. I want to understand from you, there are so many different new concepts and business models which are coming up literally every day. Now Amazon and Google are speaking about virtual power purchase agreements. So, again, a new avenue that's coming up. Europe is speaking about carbon credits compulsory bought outs by Indian steel players. And therefore, the need for a strong carbon credit market. So, if you have to, spot one risk which you want to take up and solve today from a futuristic perspective, Mr. Upadhyay, what would you focus on?
Yes, so sir was saying about select terrace also risk. Again, right now, if we wanted to focus on, then there are a lot of legacy issues. The entire energy sector is facing because we don't want to open a lot of things because of legacy issues. Virtual market, supply chain issues, blah, 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 whatever. But adding to that, I wanted to just, because after this conversation, I wanted to just give a message that there are somewhere a trust deficit between industry and maybe I can say government, but I will not say government because we have a very vibrant manufacturing system. I can say solar, I can say steel, I can say everywhere. But developer, they're preferring for the import. We keep meeting lot of developer, keep meeting lot of manufacturers. And the message that we are getting from developer that we don't have adequate capacity of manufacturing. And manufacturers saying we have adequate capacity and we are ready to supply. Then even we are unable to understand the problem. If supply is there, then why developer wanted to import? And then this is all chicken and egg story, whole legacy issue, all whatever, because Vivek sir was saying, Narendra was saying, Rishabh was saying. So we have to first zero down trust issues. Maybe a developer is also a manufacturer. I don't know, some of them. But because India is very fast moving on the manufacturing part, nobody can stop India to go for a to achieve manufacturing, big way manufacturing country status. And the developer, the owners and implementing agency, they have to have at least a confidence that our manufacturing system is sufficient enough to provide supply chain. We are ready to solve all the issue of supply chain, including tax issues, anything import export, but the trust is very, very important. Whatever we are seeing the issue in the solar sector right now, what Mr. Vivek sir was saying that within 4 to 5 months, we are going to see a lot of policy uncertainty because of the trust issues. Government set up some policy issues one by one. It is removing because of trust issues. So we are also playing devil advocate that to bridge this trust gap. And we wanted to understand that where is the issue. If supply is there, why not? Developer is picking. And if developer is saying no supply, how manufacturing are claiming that, manufacturer claiming there is supply. And this is a big challenge for us. Coming to your one point, which I wanted to give you the content that India is a very vibrant country and our energy transition is very well placed and we are leading ahead. And I hope that we are moving faster than any developed country. And the journey of solar, wind, and now we are venturing out the nuclear also. So studies like from CEEW, they have also propagated that nuclear may become one sufficient source for net zero. Now they're saying that 5,000 gigawatt would be required by 2070 for net zero. So I invite all the think tank and policy makers and third party, those who are thinking on net zero, to have one common document where you are not talking about different sources. This is creating a huge issue because right now we don't have energy ministry. We have a different ministry. coal ministry, MNRE ministry. So once you give a report, so MNRE will start working on that report. Once you give a report, then coal ministry start working on report. So whatever we are facing right now, the challenge is diversion, not convergence. So we require a convergence view. We require a convergence on the energy system and convergence on the energy mixes. So hopefully that will solve the land issues, because every technology we require land, and putting one technology and buffering on second technology is a challenge right now. So is a correct technology, what is a mix of that technology? We require a convergence on that one. And I hope CEEW is working, maybe working on the convergence, but we invite CEEW and others to work on the convergence of technology for the entire net zero things and energy mixes. Thank you from my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was a great last closing remark from you, Mr. Upadhyay, which I think he clearly spoke about solving legacy issues first and ensuring that there is convergence in terms of, the technology roadmap for net zero. Given that we are speaking on legacy, I'll take a minute. A lot has been done to clean even legacy on the DISCOM side of it, where, the RDSS scheme, as well as, initiatives like LPS is in a way helping the renewable energy developer to get their money on time. I think dues from DISCOMs have gone down from 1.2, 1.3 lakh crore to just about 75,000 crores. And that's also a great movement in terms of clearing legacy issues. One thing which might remain important from an overall value chain point of view is to ensure that complete cleanup of DISCOMs happens. Regulatory assets and regulatory liabilities that still are there on the books of the DISCOMs may not be solved with just the implementation of RDSS, while future creation of such assets and liabilities may be limited. But, regulatory assets and liabilities with a one-time write-off from states might be very, very important to close chapter on DISCOM legacy issues as we march into energy transition. I do believe that, energy transition and solar, go hand in hand, is an area on which you can speak for hours together. I'm sure Mr. Srivastava will agree. He's already unmuted. There is no opportunity which is enough to actually speak on this issue, but it was great having this conversation with all of you. Thank you so much, Mr. Upadhyay. Thank you so much, Mr. Srivastava and Mr. Verma. Thank you, Mr. Loyola. And thanks again, Rishabh, for joining in from CEEW. A great constructive conversation, and hoping to have many more conversations linked to this going ahead. Thank you, everyone.